Okay, we're just getting set up now. Ryan, can you hear me? Strangely, okay, good. The Zoom app isn't giving me usually when someone joins the chat, it gives me like a little bell sound or something, but I'm not hearing anything today. So just wanted to make sure everything was working. Right, so today I'm going to kind of do a demo that's it's kind of mirroring the stuff that you guys were doing over the last 2 weeks. In other words, I'm just going to keep on building in the demo I started last week and see if we can see if I can come up with some other ideas for districts and things that we can do to sort of define the edges between the districts. And also I wanted to talk a little bit about how we construct meaningful paths, paths that are not only meaningful to the player, but they're meaningful to us as designers, as far as how we author a real kind of experience for the player, or how much we choose to author an experience for the player versus how much we prefer to leave them with a fair amount of player agency. There's some images from the lecture in week 5 and week 6 too that were useful. I'm going to be kind of talking about them and how they are related to what I'm doing here. And let's see. Hi, River. Thanks for joining us. And I kept meaning to ask you, River. Do you prefer I call you River, or do you want Lee? I think I saw both names in your assignments. I wasn't really sure which one. If you don't care, I'll just keep on going on with River. I guess that's fine by me, as long as it's fine by you. So yeah, I was just recapping a little bit. I was saying that this week I'm going to be working more on the demo I started last week. It follows some of the same ideas that we're working on in the week 5 and week 6 assignments. And it involves building districts into kind of a Western town. So I'll be working more on that. Yeah, so I guess I'll get going then. It's 3 minutes past, so we'll get going now. Right, so we have these ideas of these different diagrams of spatial organization that Amelia put together, and they can be quite useful when you're thinking about where you place your buildings in your map, where you place your positive space and where you place your negative space. There's a lot of different orientations of paths. Or I should say different orientations of positive space to negative space. This one here I find an interesting example. Let me open this in a new tab. Yeah, this here, this is nice. Like this, if you think of this as representing an area that's bounded by, its boundaries are created by other buildings, by naturally occurring boundaries like rocks or whatever, or trees. This becomes its own district because you've clearly created bounds all the way around it. And it's not always necessary to have, hard impassable geometry to create the edges of your boundaries, but when in doubt, you may find that this is more useful to figure out ways to completely enclose your boundaries. I mean, for the player to go in and out of this area, we'd have to, say like remove this structure and then maybe remove this structure at the edges. I think there's another image that sort of shows that. I think this is based on it here. Yeah, this has a node network within it, but it's a similar shape. Some of the places have been subtracted, like right here, you can completely leave the space. There's a path through this building. But I feel like the spatial hierarchy here that's supported is good because you bounded this like big open space, this exterior, conceivably this exterior space, with all these interiors, which even if they weren't even enterable spaces, they still successfully create some nice edges around here. And I bring this up for a reason, mainly because I think when I looked at a lot of the assignments, I found that uh, people tend to, let me go back, people tend to not, when they get a little bit overwhelmed with this assignment, for a few reasons, I'm guessing. One is there's uh, a lot of different things to juggle. There's a lot of different buildings to place around the town in ways that sometimes people get they get a little bit overly concerned with maintaining the realism, what they picture as the sort of realism of a Western town, where there'd be kind of a flat plain. It'd be kind of a very vacant place with a lot of buildings kind of sort of floating around. Maybe even like this, if you consider this a top-down view. This isn't the best example, but it's a possible one, where you suddenly have buildings placed with lots of space behind them or between them too, and you can just run all around. So if I were to draw on top of this, where all the paths are, it's just a spider web of paths like around everything. And there's probably, I don't know if there's a better example, but there's others. That's probably the worst case offender. This one's not bad, but it might not be what you want depending on when you're creating your space and you're thinking about the kind of gameplay you want. You're thinking of the path you want the player to take. Maybe there's a narrative reason they have to definitely go from point A to B to C, or maybe they can go from point A to B to B1 or B2 and then to C. You have to think of those things. So right here, there's a lot of places. If you figure only these wider spaces are where players can go, at least it's a little more controlled. And you can see that these buildings get clustered together like this. This is what Amelia was referring to as imposing order. Same here, these buildings are clustered together. These are clustered together. These are clustered together. So that we don't have like path through here, path through there, path through there, path through there. We have 1, 2, 3 kind of paths, or maybe 4. It's much more limited, and I see limited in a good way. It's easier to manage uh, if we can do that. And there's even some of the other examples get even more clustered, really. Like this one imposes, I would say, even more order. This oriented to path. And this is a good. Actually, I think it's a great way to work within within this assignment, because it just gives you a lot more control over where the player goes if you can cluster up your buildings to form paths like this. Yeah, that's a good way to work. So I wonder if there's anything else. And I think there was a slide about imposing order that I found useful. Yeah, it's kind of this. This is very, this is doesn't really look like shapes of buildings, but I feel like when you cluster these things together and you sort of draw, say like you draw this darker blue outline around it, this now becomes, it doesn't read now as 3 shapes that I have to navigate around. They've been clustered together and then they appear as kind of one big block of positive space to go around. And that's what we're going to try to do when we place elements in our scene. Okay, so I'll just be also poking around as I make this. I'll just be bringing up topics that may or may not be directly related to that as we go. One thing I realized when I was looking around the demo I built last week, I did do a little bit of cleanup. I enlarged this church a little bit. It was a little too big. I talked about one of the other important things that was presented 2 weeks ago in the week 4 assignment was that idea of rendering an image composition or creating an image composition from a static point of view. And that's something that comes up a lot, especially when you're authoring these paths, as I was just talking about. You end up thinking, I'm gonna go back to here, you end up thinking about where is the player going to reach a new node, and where are they going to, from that node, what kind of things do we want them to see from their point of view. If the player enters the space, like this space right here, if they enter it from here, we have to think about, do we want them to see this path here yet, or do we want to obscure it? Do we want them to see this path? Do we want them to see an entrance to an interior right here? And there was an even better illustration back. Do I still have that open? Yes, okay, in this one. So this is a node network, again, applied over top of a level layout. And it's the kind of thing where if we say to ourselves, the player exits this building, say maybe we build this with all these places that we can enter into the environment here. Maybe we control it so that the player enters the space through, I don't know, maybe they can't get in through these buildings, but they can only get in through this opening. And they come in here, and as soon as they reach, we could say here, and they look this way, what is the image composition facing this direction? What do they see in this area? And I feel like as you build your town, especially in spaces you build that are as complex as this town, you want to think about that at any given moment. You also want to think about what happens when the player looks this way. So say this is a node, this camera that we placed last week. You know, I have it pointed up the hill here, and I just want to remind everybody, if you do add extra cameras to your scene, you can just copy the player camera. That's the best thing to do. It's the one called main camera. You can copy it, move it elsewhere in the level. Last week I accidentally, I don't know how I did it, but I managed to tick this physical camera on. I'm not even sure what that does, but I turned it on the player camera, and the camera was a little too close to my player when I moved around, so make sure you keep that off. But also make sure you untick the box by camera so that when you click on it, it only works as showing you the preview here in the editor. Because if you leave it on, the last camera you chose will be a static camera, and it will be the one that when you try to play your game, it's the only one that's going to show, and it'll kind of mess up your experience. So yeah, so I think one way that could be useful is to, I can't say I always work this way when I work in Unreal, but maybe I should. It's kind of an interesting idea. I usually just kind of remember where it is that I want the player to like have a really interesting composition presented to them. If the church was a really important landmark, maybe it had an important narrative reason for being there and I wanted it to be memorable, I could place this duplicate of the player camera at that spot so that as I build the scene, like last week I took this church, I built this church. This week I put all the church cubes as part of a gameplay object just so I could move it around specifically for this demo. So I don't know if I can lock this, right? I can, right? I can lock that, but then I can select the church, and then from the camera I can just see my changes as I make them. Like I said, I actually don't like looking at the church head on. It doesn't provide me with enough interesting visual information. It's not compositionally as interesting, so I'm going to rotate it so we get a better view of the church. And I'm still going to try to put it right where I want it. So maybe I want it there. I can go up and check and make sure it looks okay. The space is okay around the church. But these cameras can be kind of useful, I think, for that, for helping you kind of get a preview of how things look. Then if you want later, you could always keep track of your cameras. And also I named this one POV _camera_1. And just clean ways of working are important. Like naming conventions are important. They help you not get lost in your own work. Um, like right now, I still have in this level, I still have a ton of basic cube duplicates that I made that I've duplicated to like quickly block out um, like for instance, this natural rock formation here. But at some point, you know, you want to go in and you want to make sure that you've tried to organize things. Like at least I blocked in these wagons, but I haven't like grouped these. For instance, I haven't grouped this like whatever this building is here. I haven't grouped this building here. But yeah, so I named the camera. Long story short, I named the camera POV camera just so when I have to search for it in the hierarchy, you know, I know where all my cameras are and they're easy to locate. Because eventually your hierarchy ends up with so many objects in it if you're building a big scene that if you didn't label things properly, it gets tricky. You can also use layers if you want. If you want to experiment with the layer system, you can do that because then you're allowed to add things to whatever layer you want, and you can select things only by layer. That's another way of sort of organizing your workflow. And like I said, I don't work professionally in Unity. These are just common editor tools that are available in most editor packages. I've messed around in a lot of different editors, and it's just stuff that's really helpful to help you organize your work. Especially if you work like me, if you don't tend to block out your stuff in Maya, if you tend to just do everything in the level, like in Unity, if you use ProBuilder or you just duplicate prototypes a lot, that can be useful to you. So, okay, maybe I'll try adding in some other POV cameras here. I'm trying to think. Maybe I could add one here to this view. See, luckily that actually looks good. When you turn things at an angle, it tends to make things work out pretty well. So I'll just duplicate this camera. Should probably unlock that. So yeah, if I want my player to have this be an important location, then I could just place a camera there. And I assume they would look up a little bit at it. I can start building my composition from this side as well. Okay, so yeah, I just wanted to touch on that before I got going on some other things. So that this idea of a lot of playable spaces, I already, when I built this, I already started grouping my buildings together. I built buildings with shapes that weren't just cubes. It helped me take up more room. It helped me like create boundaries, like create walls on the edges of the path by like rounding this corner here, rounding this corner there. So I guess I can do an example of what happens if you don't do this kind of sculpted spaces. If you just kind of end up placing a lot of buildings that you can walk around. It's just kind of hard for me to make myself do because I don't usually work this way, but I'm going to try to do, and I'm not bragging. It just I'm just going to try to build this in a way that's not useful to me. So suddenly you have, say I clustered these here into grouping of buildings. You start doing like that. Say maybe you start building a space that you want this to be a street. Whoa. I want this to be a street that follows, why does that keep, I'm grabbing the wrong widget. A street that follows, say, a pattern. I brought this up last week as a spatial organization I didn't think was incredibly useful for games. It was this one. It might be depending on what you're building, but for our purposes, this is probably not a good one. You have these really long lines of sight. The only thing good about it is the buildings are packed together really tightly, and that means your paths are at least controlled here. But in a lot of assignments that I've been seeing, I see people leaving a lot of space like this between their buildings. And okay, maybe this one does get turned because they want the player to sort of round the corner. So let's see, is this a little bit odd? A little bit odd. I'm just gonna fix this edge because it bothers me. Anyway, okay, so my point here is when we do this, we end up with like, we're not controlling where the player goes. Even if we say like, I don't know, let's say this far side of the level was, it was all of these natural rock structures. So we had a lot of this going on. I guess I don't need my grid snapping for this. So at least we try to indicate these are rocks by creating more slopes, I guess. That might work. All right, so maybe we can make this a little bigger. I'm getting a little bit fussy with this probably. Okay, so that's good enough. So when we play this now, we end up with unintended paths. Run back here, we still have a bit of a sense of a district here. This seems like a bit of a district. We get some clear path choices. Then we start running back down this street and there's buildings, but now like there's all these odd back alleys that we leave here. And you can't take any of this for granted. Like, unless this is where you really want the player to go for a specific reason, then you shouldn't have these accessible at all. These also manifest themselves like even back here. Somewhere back here, there's other places I don't really want the player to go. Like even back here, things like this. Although actually, I think I just dropped myself into a dead end, which is not what I intended. Where was I intending to go there? Well, yeah, that's bad in and of itself. But I guess the other example might be like over here. Yeah, let me just put some buildings there. See if this were another building or some other structure. I saw a lot of levels where there'd be something like that, where yes, they wanted to kind of block my view of that a little bit. But then there'd be a lot of loose ends sort of where there are a lot of places I could wander around and it didn't feel intentional, but I wasn't really sure. Or other times it seems like, say there was a space back here and it seemed like it was left by accident. I'm having this, if you guys ever see this problem here, this shadow problem, you can fix it. Let's see if I can quickly fix it. I'm getting distracted here, but this bothers me. Is it this one? Auto grid. SSCJ Materials Auto Grid. Is this the one? Yeah. Yeah, you can change the render queue from shader to transparent, and it tends to fix those weird drawing issues like that. So yeah, so anyway, what I was saying, I'm sorry, that was a bit of a distraction. I feel like someone will build their level and they'll sort of set an idea in their mind of where the bounds of their level are. Like uh, let's say they also suddenly decide, I make that white. Lighter is okay. They might decide something like, you know, my building, or I should say my town is bound on edges with maybe a wall, because this was a common theme in a lot of the concept art. Maybe there was kind of a protected wall like this. And so they would think about, this might happen when you build your level bounds early and then you get kind of stuck with them in your mind anyway. Let's say you build kind of your protective outer wall down here. Oops. And maybe there's a building. I'm just trying to leave it free floating so I can make my point here, but can't select that wedge. Okay. So what I'd see is I'd see this area that I could now move around back here. And it seemed like some people will look at this space and they'll think like, well, my wall's here, as if this wall can be moved. And they'll say, all right, so I have to think of what this back area is. And then they'll start going in and, you know, they'll start adding detail to this back area. Like suddenly you'll see like, I'll see some barrels put in, you know, and then let me see what else we have. Maybe some pots. Or I don't know, maybe they'll get hung up on making making this like a space that seems like it's real. So suddenly, like it matters to gameplay or just for exploration purposes. But it won't really be that there's a clear reason. So suddenly, I'm really getting too involved with this, I think. Definitely getting too involved with this. So yes, maybe they'll try to make it look like this is a real area back here, but it's really not. Like even this makes me start to think this is a district. I'm trying to get even more involved here, but oh well. Just represent a door a little bit. So suddenly this looks like maybe it's supposed to be, you know, a space that's important because someone decided to art it, to add some prototype art to it. But really it's, if we zoom out and we look at it, I can tell by looking that like this wasn't really meant to be a space back here. it's just kind of leftover space, much the way this back alley here between like, say also the person, the designer decided they wanted this rock wall at one edge, they wanted this this sort of gate at the other, this fence or security wall, whatever we're calling it. And yeah, it just means that you have to try to not leave that in your mind as an inviolate, unchangeable thing in your level. You have to remember that you may have to rip this out and move it to make it make more sense. You may suddenly say like, well, and you want to do this at this early stage, like what I'm doing here with just basic blocks. I haven't built interiors. I haven't decorated them with a lot of props. There's not a lot of work to move around. Not that it's not possible to move work around, but if you properly group your stuff, but it can become more of a pain once there's interdependencies of scale, like once something's built to a certain scale and you really can't change it because so many other things are dependent on it, or so many other great ideas are dependent on it. You don't want to make that an issue. So early on at the block stage, it's better to make sure that you're thinking this way. And then, think of ways you can make this, like say that for some reason, the buildings you're making they're not big buildings. They're little, like, little sort of flimsy wooden buildings. They don't have a lot of imposing structures. They're not very strong buildings. They're not buildings made with a lot of money. This is me just adding a little bits of detail here. Like they're just kind of wooden clapboard buildings, so they don't really have a lot to them. And so you can't maybe build a lot of really big buildings like the scale of the church, or maybe they have to be all about this scale because you've done your research and you know that like you have a scale of buildings that makes sense for the kind of town you're trying to build. Well, then if that's the case, like like I said, don't be afraid to go really heavy-handed at first, at least with bounding in your edges. Like say this street being straight is important. You do want to maintain this street, even though I personally like I don't like long straightaways too much. But say for some reason here you need it. Let's say it's even longer than this. Let's say it's yeah, it gets even longer, we'll say. And you end up with these kind of odd, these odd bits here where if you let the player wander around through here, you can't let them encounter strange geometry like this. You just can't have that. And I see a lot of that in some levels where a lot of stuff gets left over just because the player wasn't blocked from going back there when it's definitely a step you should take. So for this, I'm going to, when I talked about heavy-handed ways of blocking the player, and just, go with some walls then. Or whatever it is, like I said, since we're at this block out stage, maybe this will be a fence, but maybe maybe it won't. But maybe for right now, you just leave it at a simple bit of geometry like that keeps the player from moving back into spaces that are confusing and unnecessary. The other issue too, when you leave open, when you create lots of spaces, like the space back here that I showed that, isn't really a space, it's just kind of a leftover like a background space. Once you do that, and you have to take your level design to the art team and they have to do a full art pass on it, and they have to model all the props, they have to build the terrain, they have to possibly, well, I guess, yeah, build this outer wall, they have to build everything. And they also have to do a whole pass of decoration on areas that matter. Every time you leave these extra spaces open, if you want them to be like even an optional space, like maybe this is an optional space, it isn't required for the player to go back here to complete objectives, but maybe they maybe you want to have like secondary objectives, like optional objectives, like in Uncharted, where you wander off the main path and you find the unique little treasure that you get added to your treasure inventory for bragging rights and points, pretty much. Like um, that, if you want to build that area, like that makes sense. You can justify why it's there from a design perspective, but you can't just justify any space you want for the player to wander around in. That frequently won't be the case. Oops, I killed my little facade up here. Yeah, so that's why if you leave these places open, the art team will probably be asking you questions like, is this necessary? And you should know yourself before you get to that point that no, it's not necessary. And that's why, like I said, even here I'm adding these walls because because of the way I need something to look, I do need to leave this like this. But it's much more easy to just sort of go in and do that imposition of order, where we just sort of move our buildings together, like over here, or we build buildings that are a combination of shapes and not just blocks. Like this could be, I mean, it looks like one building, but it could be like, it could have 3 different storefronts in it if we really wanted. We could say that it has like a separate storefront over on the side. You could even have one over there, but it makes it easier to control your paths. It's the point I'm trying to get across, when you can just keep clustering things together. Like it's pretty much just like city blocks. Like in it, I realize this is supposed to have that feel of an old West town. So if you really were trying to get that feel of an old West town, let me just go back to Pinterest really quick. If I go to Old West Town, if I can spell here. Yeah, let's just look for that. That's not what I wanted. It filled in my Old West Town. There we go. Yeah, so we just, photo reference is always your friend. Interestingly enough, interestingly enough, there is a lot of clustering of buildings in the Old West towns. Isn't that interesting? You can see right there. I mean, this is a recreation of Old West town. It's like more of a theme park. I'm trying to see if there's like a bit more of an accurate recreation, because not a lot of these left or anything. Well, they're useful enough. I mean, these are recreations, but they're pretty accurate. There's a lot of clustering of things together into chunks like that. So that kind of shows you a more useful way to build your stuff. I mean, let me look at this picture. This one. That's my picture. Yeah, this one here, there's still a lot of open space around the whole town, and one thing that is very typical is these like main streets that were just like at all the buildings. The whole town was like a collection of buildings that were clustered together along the sides of a main street, or 2 at tops, not many. And of course, in Western movies, this is where there'd be a shootout that happened. But um, so this doesn't work for games nearly as much. I mean, it works. Let me put it this way: Red Dead Redemption does have some. I know the Red Dead games in general, they do have some levels that are built this way, and the thing is, they are really trying to go for realism. They have a lot of open plains. Um, you tend to ride your horse across really open plains. You see the towns at a distance. When you get there, there's a lot of open space around the buildings or around the building clusters. Funny thing is, I actually found this problematic with, I didn't play the last Red Dead, the current Red Dead, but I played the last one. But one of the issues they had was with the big wide open areas was you could be riding along like a really wide open part of the desert. You could come across some bandits or something, and they just start shooting at you, and suddenly, because they wanted to build a realistic, prairie or realistic open plain or something like that that would have existed in the American Southwest, guess what? You had no cover to take from bullets getting flung at you. Um, and I mean, they did try to mitigate it with things like the slow motion, whatever, Max Payne style shooting, but whatever. I felt like it was one of those things where, and this is true in a few different Rockstar games, where they try to build an accurate recreation of things that exist in the real world. Um, and they they have a certain amount of success doing it, but sometimes when I play them, I feel like um, me playing it in a completely recreated, accurately recreated open world makes me sort of long for a more authored level design experience that was made for like a gunfight or something like that. So yeah, so even what I'm showing you here, like this isn't that likely then, I guess. So I guess what it means is if if your photo reference is showing you otherwise, if it's showing you that yes, the buildings were often clustered together, then then you should do it too. That's what I would say. That way at least your paths will be much more controlled. Even set them a little bit. You have to do little tricks just to make your block seem not too monotonous. So yeah, so I think this is a pretty long line of sight. Um, it's not necessarily bad. I still would rather, I think, have a protruding part of this. If I think of that as having kind of a porch on it, it helps obscure things a little. I find a lot of times, like I found using these wagons that I sort of threw together help me sort of build sort of district boundaries. So if I wanted a district back here behind this big building, I like to have some ways that I can reinforce that perception of it being a separate area. One way might just be to add more of these, really. I could also use another tree, I guess. Let's see. Yeah, that could work, I guess. So let's see. So now that I've covered that, I'm going to talk, I guess I'm going to work a little bit more on some districts. So we already created this path up to the church. This can now kind of become its own district if we want. I think that's an absolute possibility, but first I'm going to just like neutralize this, which like I said is it's superfluous. It doesn't serve a point. It just feels like extra space the player doesn't need to go, and it can be kind of confusing, really. So I would say probably just bring this way in. Yeah, and actually, think of ways that we can block in this completely. Yeah, like maybe we make this like a, maybe it's like a stable. Sometimes when you're doing your blocking, you'll get an idea for what a building might be. I guess that's why this, like this one seemed like a saloon when you enter town. It faces the entrance route. People come in and they, you know, they get a drink, that kind of thing. This one feels like a good place for people to maybe, I don't know, like a place to put horses. I realize, well, horses could be just roped up outside, but maybe we want to make this so that there's actually, what's it called, a livery? I forget what it's called. Place where horses, or it could be a blacksmith shop. I mean, it could be something where they make horseshoes, like something that's useful, something to do with horses, or it could be a barn where they're kept. I don't really know what this is, but I'm not going to do too many interiors here, but I feel like this one, I'm just sort of doing an interior here so I kind of remember, like, if I was working on this further into a full level design, I'd kind of remember, oh yeah, I wanted that to be, you know, I wanted this to be like a stable or something. So I might just put a little bit of detail that helps me remember what I wanted it to be. Actually, I think I made a shape that was, did I make a shape that was a wedge? I guess I did. Yeah, because I work so much, um, or I sometimes I should say tend to work a lot with primitives when I'm doing blockouts. If you don't already have a proper set of primitives in your sort of level design blockout meshes, it's nice to make shapes you're going to use a lot. Like, say this one here makes a good what do you call it? Makes a good rooftop shape. So you know, so I made a wedge because I find that that would be useful for me to quickly have rooftops. Even though this the UV mapping is not good on this, it looks like it's not. Actually, what if I just do back to auto grid? Ah, okay. I grabbed a texture that wasn't mapping properly, but whatever, that's okay. So yeah, so maybe I want to make sure that's later. I know that is a stable or whatever. So let's move this guy over there like that. Actually, maybe I'll move him this way. Another thing too is right now my lighting is looking very dark. Um, when you're doing your early blockouts, even though I realize like level, like, how do I put this? Lighting isn't traditionally part of a level designer's job. When you're doing blockouts, you still need to get a good image across, a good impression across of what you're trying to show, the kind of feeling you're trying to get in your level. So to that end, don't be afraid to rotate your directional light here. Like I want the light to be showing more on um, things that are useful to me. Maybe I can, actually this directional light can go anywhere because it's sort of omniscient or whatever they call it. Okay, so what I'm going to try to do is try to rotate this so like there's actually light hitting the front of this building. I feel like that would work a little better. So you just rotate it and your light changes. I like how that looks a little better. We're getting some light on the front of this building, and then I think we'll probably, yeah, we actually even we can now see more geometry across the board, really. Even the church looks better with that kind of lighting going on. So yeah, let me save that. I can actually see more of my edges that way. Although I always work in shaded wireframe because just helps me not lose track of where all my edges are going. So okay, so now we blocked off this back area. It's no longer accessible, but it is from up here. So you have to think about, how do we stop the player from going down there into those areas? Before I used over here, like I still have like holes, so to speak, to plug here. So if I'm plugging my holes, of trapping players, like this is a good one to just keep using. Just keep using geometry like this. I know this seems like a much less glamorous part of the job, but it's something that too often I find people kind of neglect to remember. Another thing too, like I mentioned before, even though, say like in this early blockout phase, I'm doing this, once you start creating really large boundaries like this around your level, things that they can start seeming in your mind like they cannot possibly be moved. And just remember, you can always move them. You can always like at this stage when you're blocking things in, don't be afraid to just, just take stuff um, and destroy it and rebuild it as much as you need because it's easy at this stage. It's much easier at this stage. In fact, typically if there's scripting in a level like this, I mean, it's much better that there's at least some early playable versions that work in this stage. Like say you have combat planned in here and it plays pretty well based on the blocks you've placed in, then that's good. Then the general footprint of the meshes you're going to need once the art team has to go in and start building your level. You have all your scale set properly for them. Oh man. And you prevent a lot of problems down the road. And again, like right up here, we could say, how much do I want to build a district around the church? A lot of you did build a district around the church. It's a nice, easy one to do. The churches have a lot of things around them. And I mean, they have a lot of recognizable things that are thematically recognizable, I should say, like a graveyard is the common one. There could even be a little like, I don't know, something serene or something creepy, one or the other. Like usually you get one or the other, I feel. So let's say if this is, probably the wall wouldn't be there. We probably want to do uh, more geo that's natural. Like say the mesas and stuff, they kind of stretch around here a little bit. Actually, I'm going to make this more like, this will kind of be the graveyard area. This is another one of those decisions where you say, okay, do I want the player to be able to go all the way around the church? And if so, like, there's always a point where you make a long path that goes in one direction, and it may kind of, if it's too much of a dead end, I feel like that's not a great thing. We've already made 2 paths here. We've made the sort of almost main path that goes up that way. We made kind of a secondary path over here. In fact, maybe, yeah, I guess that does come up at the best location. It still looks good from that angle. Yeah, but we could just say, do we want the player to be able to come down a different route from here? There's already 2 routes in. That's probably enough. So we probably don't want them to be able to go all the way around behind the church. It's just a guess. It's just one of those things like, I can't say it's especially useful to be able to go all the way behind the church. So because this is like a somewhat landscaped area, we could always just use like fences or whatever. If we say this is our, yeah, this wall's not working either though. Let's see, we can do, yeah, I'm gonna go with the big rock on the corner. That's always easier. Actually, where's that one prototype? We had terrain, right? Yeah, actually, these are really useful. I kind of forgot we had these for a moment. Let's see. Yeah, these rocks are really useful now that I think about it. Doesn't need to be quite that massive, I guess. Mm-hmm. You guys are pretty quiet. You don't have any questions? That's fine. Just want to make sure. It's been a very quiet week with CGMA. I noticed there weren't even a lot of assignments were not turned in this week. I'm guessing it's the beginning of summer. That's one of those things. Okay, so say we do that. And we could even just act like, let's rotate this. And I'll slap a different texture on that. Mm. Where was that one? I'm sorry, I'm looking for a different texture here. Okay. Thought I had a good solid color. That's okay. Just wanted something a little lighter, just to differentiate this as like a more of a fence than anything. How does that look from, let me see, I don't know if this changed much from here. I guess I can still see my composition okay. I think we could still move this out a little bit. Just trying to think of how big this needs to be to feel like its own district. I think the answer is a little bigger. That's okay, I guess. Okay, I guess that works all right. But yeah, the other thing too, like if it depends how much work the artist will probably do a little bit of work at some point on your sort of out of playable space areas. Like back here, like for instance, I'm just putting in these like really rough blocks to represent some outer rock walls, but then say you do something like, let me see. Yeah, let me grab this. Maybe this is my fence, or represents a fence. And maybe I start sort of building in a little more thematic detail into my graveyard. Oops, hold on. I'm just going to add I'll just say church fence, or graveyard fence. And let's see. Whoa, how did it get up here? That was odd. This is very unscientific of me. Very. I'm just looking for a way to group these fence objects, but maybe it's not even necessary. Probably not really that necessary. Yeah, in fact, I don't need snapping on for this either. Yeah, so anyway, I'm just going to put a little more detail in here. Didn't I turn off snapping or no? There we go. Okay, so let's see, that's our graveyard fence. I duplicate it. Again, we think about where we want the player to go or we don't want them to go. In this case, let's say I don't want the player to go back here. So, I kind of try to more clearly indicate that. And then we just add in some more trees. And we'd add in, where is it? All right, we add in like our grave markers. So, we just build a little scene back here. Maybe we also put a tree in the back. And we put, where was it? This guy, I guess. Put kind of a couple bigger markers back there. Actually, maybe we just Maybe this was the fat cat who ran the town or something at some point. And let's go back to terrain. Maybe I can use this. Right. So now we have like a little, this now it becomes thematically its own district, but also we ended up blocking off areas here like that. And we could still indicate like roughly the plans we have for what's going on back here with the terrain, with the topography, all that stuff. But if we leave it, we can at least like not worry too much about the amount of detail back here, because we could say, well, this isn't really important for gameplay, so I'm not going to bother putting too much detail in it. But we put kind of the barest of bones on it to show what it is. And so yeah, we can indicate little things that they at least show the sense of place. They at least provide a basic explanation, a basic setting for everything. Like this is, this is in natural rock formations. It's maybe on top of a mesa, that kind of thing, or built into the side of a mountain, whatever that is really. But we also make it clear like areas that are just, they're not useful for the player. There's no need for a player path there. In fact, this might even be, yeah, this could even really be something where we say, maybe we need to show like why this is relevant. So we build, or why this is thematically important. So we build all the details to help convince the player that this really is, a cemetery. Maybe we actually make it, they can't even go back here. Maybe it's just a place to see, that kind of thing. Because as soon as you convert a space from a space that allows the player to walk around into a space that they see at a distance, like they see suddenly stuff in the distance, that means the visual fidelity has to go way up. The art team has to spend more time and money making it look good. So it's one of those things like you have to decide like maybe there was a little optional treasure to find back here. So, so we keep it open. We let the player go back there. But over here, there's no need. We don't need the player to like run around, find it in this direction. So we just block it off because maybe actually we want to spend more time and energy building an interior to this church instead. That could be kind of cool. Or maybe we also want to say we really do want to keep a tight control over where the player goes, but maybe we do want them to find something back here, but maybe it's let's see if I can find this. Where's the coin? I can't remember where the coin went. Oh, the treasure box. Okay. Yeah, like, I don't know, like say maybe you can see a treasure up here in the distance, but you can't get to it. You can actually see it like over this fence or something. So instead we block it off like this. And then what else could we do? We control the player paths a little tighter. But now maybe ultimately, let me get rid of this. I don't know, this is kind of sloppy, but maybe they can now exit out of the cemetery this way. So that we make a path where they're forced to go in, through the church. Now say I'm inside the church, they can like maybe pop out a broken stained glass window on the side that immediately leads them to see the treasure. Now they're outside the church, they grab the treasure, and now they can, they can go out this way and hop over and exit. Yeah, so it's just the reason I bring these things up again are just trying to give examples of how you can be mindful of your reasoning for why you create paths for where the player can go and where they can't go. But yeah, I think that's those are some of the major points I wanted to talk about. This is a really big topic. This is like, it's not the biggest assignment. The biggest assignment of the course is probably the last week. This is probably the second biggest assignment. It requires you to build a lot of stuff. So it's important to sort of be thinking about this now. Like choose your, what do they call it? Pick your battles, I'm going to say. Build the areas that are only meaningful to the gameplay. And if they're not, just totally like completely block them off and make sure you're not wasting time building areas, building spaces that are just extraneous. That's my biggest point I could make with this particular demo. So I guess if there's no questions, I'm going to check the message boards. I didn't check them yet. I don't know if we had many people posting anything this week. Week 6 looks like no. Just wanted to make sure if there were any questions there, I could address them, but no. Okay, so thanks for showing up, guys. I'll be back here again next week on Sunday. Actually, I don't know. There might be, now that I mention it, there might be a bit of a rescheduling for next week's Q&A time. I have to go out of town, so it might actually get pushed a little bit later than Sunday. Probably will, but I'll definitely post that in the forums and let you guys know as soon as I do. Hopefully tomorrow. But thanks for showing up, and I'll see you again soon. Bye-bye.